My guest at this time is Patrina Mosley. She is Director of Life, Culture, and Women's Advocacy at the Family Research Council. Already this year, Democrats in New York and Vermont have passed sweeping abortion laws. Democrats tried but failed to do the same in Virginia, and similar efforts are underway at least in Rhode Island, New Mexico, and Illinois. Democrats also blocked a bill in the U.S. Senate that would require the same medical care for babies who survive abortions as would be provided to any newborn baby. So what's at work here, and what is the impact of this movement? That's what we'll discuss for the next few moments. And Patrina, thanks so much for being with us.
Greg, thanks for having me on.
Is the legislation in these other states pretty much the same as what we saw in New York and Virginia? In other words, are New Mexico, Rhode Island, and Illinois lawmakers looking to remove the same restrictions that we've seen in New York, for example?
On a simplistic basis, yes. I mean, there are some that may have a little bit more extremity within them, but in simplicity, yes. And they're all putting it under the header of reproductive expansion. This is reproductive health. And for so long, I think the left and many of the Americans have enjoyed this cognitive dissonance between abortion and a real baby in the womb. But when we're talking about late-term abortions, we're talking about a baby that is sitting on the table, of which Governor Ralph Northam said he would keep comfortable until basically they would murder the child. Then we're talking about something completely different, and that's called infanticide. And this is something that Americans do not sit well with. This is a child that you are able to see with your very own eyes, that you're able to hold in your very own hands, and you're saying it's okay to kill that child. That is something completely different, and that is not reproductive health. That's just called murder.
Patrina, was this issue something that Democrats campaigned on last year? Why are we seeing all of these states pushing all of these bills now to remove restrictions on abortion, and in some cases, like you mentioned, not even want medical care for babies who are delivered alive after a failed abortion?
I think right now the left and Democrats, they are scared. They feel that the courts have been stacked against them when it comes to abortion issues, whether that's true or not. They would seem to think so, and they know that over the last 5 years, we've been winning at the state level with pro-life legislation, and that's been a huge success. And so for them, they're terrified. So they're trying to work their system and working the states. And in this case, we're seeing that plan roll out in New York, Rhode Island, Illinois, and New Mexico. So pretty much the same strategy as pro-lifers. But we've been working in the states quietly, even under the Obama administration, making gains and strides. Now they're saying, oh, we need to be doing the same thing. And I think that's why they're making their pitch so aggressive right now.
We're talking to Patrina Mosley of the Family Research Council. And Patrina, I also mentioned the vote in the Senate. It got 53 votes to ban infanticide, or allowing babies who survive abortions and are delivered to die, but it needed 60 to actually get to a final vote and then pass. Republicans, conservatives, pro-life lawmakers have tried numerous times in the House of Representatives to get a vote on this, but the Democratic majority is refusing to do that. So now House Minority Whip Steve Scalise, among others, is trying to move a discharge petition around the House of Representatives to force the vote. Explain how that works.
Well, in this case here, if you get a majority of members of Congress to sign a discharge petition on a particular act or a particular bill, the Speaker is then forced to bring that bill or act to the floor for a vote. Because by that, you have a majority consensus of representatives who want to have a vote on this. So that is the strategy at play here. Most of Americans, you got over 77% of Americans are telling their representatives, we don't want late-term abortion, we don't want infanticide, and they should be listening to the people that they represent. And we are in full support of Scalise and the majority whip to bring a cert petition to the floor.
And do you have any idea whether you can get to the 218 or whatever the number is to force Pelosi's hand?
You know, we don't know. And I think for a lot of Democrats, I mean, we got the Republicans that we need, but for a lot of Democrats, it's really going to depend on whether they want to win in 2020. And I hope they're looking at their polling and they're looking at their constituents and basically saying, do I want a job or not? That's what it's really going to come down to. whether or not they really want to do the right thing in their hearts. I'm sure that they want to stay in power. So it's really going to be some of those states that probably went more for Trump that these Democrats are in, where they're really going to have to pay attention to their people and make the call.
A lot of different explanations from Senate Democrats for why they did not vote for the legislation that I mentioned earlier. Only 3 Democrats voted for it. The others offered explanations ranging from, well, this is still about reproductive health, so I'm not in favor of this, to this never happens. What do you make of those explanations?
Well, we know what's really at play here. They will fight tooth and nail to keep abortion on demand accessible, and really what that does is it normalizes in people's mind late-term abortions and infanticide, when in fact those things rarely ever happen. But it starts here at policy. Augustine once said, and I love the quote so much, statecraft is soulcraft. That means that policy and legislation has the power to craft the character of your citizens. And this right here, this Borderline Protection Survivors Act, is very, very important as it has an impact to mold people's character on this issue and their morality. We cannot, as Americans, say that it's okay, whether you want to call it reproductive health or rights or abortion. Is at this point we know. There's common sense knowledge. We know that this is murder, and if a child survives an abortion attempt, we as a country have a moral obligation to give that child a chance at life.
Now, you are involved in a debate in Maryland. I believe you're testifying there this week about a bill that would ban abortions once the unborn child is able to feel pain. That's also a very deep blue state. What's the prognosis there?
Well, we'll see what happens. I think there's a lot of good bills going up in the Maryland legislature right now. They all have a fighting chance. The probability, we're hopeful. But we know that this is only a small battle that will lead to the war. With the trend right now of New York, Illinois, New Mexico, and Rhode Island pushing for aggressive, extreme abortion laws, we know that this pain capable is just one small step in the fight against an extremity that is probably soon to come. So we have to set our flag in the ground right here, wherever we can, to stand for life and to stand for human decency. We know at 20 weeks a child has enough nervous system to feel pain. They can respond to stimuli, and they have an increase in hormonal responses to pain at that time by 20 weeks. So at least by that point, can we all say that it is a humane and decent thing to protect a child from the cruel dismemberment of abortion?
Well, as you mentioned, this is a long-time battle, a war really, going on since at least 1973, but really even before that. There does seem to be some good news for your side here, though, and that is how Americans are responding to these debates. This I'm quoting now from the Washington Examiner recently. A new Marist poll shows a sharp jump in the percentage of Democrats that identify as pro-life compared to just a month ago. 34% of them now identify as pro-life, up from 20%, with the simultaneous drop in pro-choice identification from 75 to 61%. So obviously folks are paying attention. What's your reaction to the fact that even a decent percentage of Democrats are reacting like that?
I think this is a great sign. This is a great sign to show that Democratic voters and their politicians are not in sync, that their politicians and representatives, ironically, are not representing them. I think that's kind of the, in a sense, a poetic justice of going too far, that it actually turns on you. And that's what we're seeing happen right now with the Democratic Party. They have just gone too far, and it seems to not be working in their favor. I think ultimately 2020 will tell, but the signs, the tea leaves are saying this isn't good and your people aren't with you. And I hope they listen to that. I really do.
Now, we were talking about the discharge petition in the House. You mentioned it's unclear at this point whether or not Steve Scalise and his allies will get the number of votes or signatures necessary to get to a final vote. But the petition itself is public. So those who sign will be known and those who don't sign will be known. How important is that, along with that Senate vote going into 2020, do you think?
I think that's very important, especially to the Democrats who are now identifying themselves as more pro-life than before. If we can get on record that, hey, your representative who you voted for, who's a Democrat, is not even standing with you on this issue, then that's very important and very telling going into the election. So, I mean, this is a moral issue as well as an election issue, but this just shows that the morality of the country is going towards more pro-life, and it's up to the elected officials to say, am I going to truly represent the people that I claim to represent, or am I just going to hold on to power and do what I want to do and enforce my will on the people? So I think this is a very important petition that will tell us a lot of things.
Patrina, we'll be watching. As you mentioned, a lot of other states are involved in this debate, and it's not going anywhere, it would seem. Thank you very much for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Greg, for having me. Have a good day.
You too. Patrina Mosley is Director of Life, Culture, and Women's Advocacy at the Family Research Council. I'm Greg Columbus reporting for Radio America.